Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be looking at Debian 11. This is the Bullseye release right after this. So, August I think it was the 14th, Debian released a new version of their operating system, and this is a major release. We'll talk about how Debian works, but I think probably the first thing to do is always go back and look at Debian's history. They've had a very long run in the Linux operating system business. So they were established by Ian Murdoch in August of 1993. The first release of Debian occurred in September of 1993 as well. So, yeah, they've had a long run. They're almost, 28 years old now. And the first stable release was in June of 1996 called Buzz. And so Debian is one of the oldest. It is not the oldest, but it is one of the oldest distros that have been around for a long, long time. Debian was the first to establish a contract with its users, and those were drafted by Bruce Perens in 1996. And this was the Debian Social Contract and the Debian Free Software Guidelines. So in those two documents, they outline what their mission is, how they expect people to use this open source software, and what they expect in return. So the current project leader has changed since Debian 10, and it's now Jonathan Carter, as far as I know. Of course, the Debian releases are named after Toy Story characters, and so I don't know what's going to happen when they run out, but maybe they'll go to something else. So there are 3 branches of Debian that are currently deployed that you will find out on their website. So I'll give you a explanation of what that is. So stable releases of Debian is their production quality release. It is their current release. It's intended to be well tested, and it's generated from the testing branch. And so when they start to work on the stable branch, they'll freeze the testing branch, and they'll start really intensively testing and making sure that everything is good and stable. The only time that the stable releases are updated is if they find some major security or instability in the software or in the operating system that has to be patched. And then they'll incorporate those fixes into the base release. So you won't find the version numbers clicking over very fast in Debian. In fact, they'll try to hold to that as much as they can. And the reason behind that is, I've explained this before, that when you're in production environments, the last thing you want to have happen is for a kernel release to come in and force you into a reaccreditation. So, yeah, you don't want that. And you probably, if you're in a development environment, you might want to be in the more unstable versions of Debian. Depends on, I guess, it would depend on what your release cycle is for your software when you intend on, pushing new releases out, and what are your dependencies in terms of libraries and versions that need to be installed with it. So the testing is a preview release. It is the testing branch of Debian. So in the early one, now that they have a stable release out, this testing branch will roll back and start receiving SID updates, which is the unstable release. Developers typically, the way this works is I'll kind of bounce between the two and explain it. So the unstable release, or SID, is normally where new features are brought into Debian for the first time. And it is like it said. I mean, you're basically pulling down a rolling release that includes kernel updates, package updates, library updates that are occurring as the developers add them into the development channel of Debian. Once they have what they want for their next stable release, they create a testing release and they start pushing those SID changes over there. And then they do once they built up the testing release, that is the area where they continue doing testing for the next stable release. So those are always generated initially from the unstable branch. They may or may not take changes from the unstable branch. I haven't been involved with it in a long time, so I don't know if they're still, used to be that they would take changes provided that they were still in an alpha. They hadn't gotten all of the features into the release that they wanted yet. But once they reach the point where they have the features in, they cut off the alpha changes because, of course, you don't want that. You don't want new packages, new libraries coming in while you're trying to test, unless it's to fix a security or a bug or an instability while you're going along. So, yeah. So the unstable part of it is usually considered bleeding edge. There are a lot of people that I know that use the SID branch of Debian and quite happy with that. And you may be too. It is a minimal ISO file, so if you're looking for, your favorite desktop environment or a spin or what they call a pure release of Debian, forget it. You ain't gonna find it in the unstable. If you want it, you build it up yourself. So the derivatives and flavors of Debian. There's currently, as of August 2021, there are 121 active Debian variant derivatives. So derivatives they take the Debian releases, they create their own, and then Debian hopes, they encourage those derivatives to push changes back into the Debian baseline so that those new things that the derivatives are working on find their way back into Debian. And that, that's really good for the derivatives as well, because they don't have to keep trying to get their changes working on top of the latest stable releases from Debian. So it is it's a good marriage. The idea is that you feed your changes back in, then Debian has to test them and you don't. Not a bad deal. So Debian also has pure blends, and those are subsets of a Debian release. You've probably heard them called spins or something like that. So, but the idea behind it is it's a subset of a Debian release that is really meant to meet the needs of a particular user. For example, there's Debian Junior, which is made for children. And then there's Debian Science, which is made for researchers and scientists. So there are others. There are other ones that contain a number of tools that would be useful for a particular type of user. Hopefully to try to meet their needs so they don't have to try to scramble around and figure out what's the best packages to use for their environment. As we said, it is the source of many derivatives, and some of the more common ones are Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and there's, like I said, 121 of them, so there's a lot. As of Debian 11, there have been some changes in the architecture support, as there always will be. There's going to be some that are just, why are we supporting this? It's old and we don't need it anymore. So this is the current release list for hardware architecture as of Debian 11. If you're running 10, you may find there are differences in the architecture support for your release. But these are for 11. So AMD 64, which of course is the Intel AMD x86 64 platform. ARM 64, which would be the 64-bit ARM chips, and ARM EL, ARM HF, which are the 32-bit, and then there's some of the high-performance ARM chips that are in that vein as well. So MIP SEL is also support, or MIPS EL. PowerPC 64 EL and S390X support, which is the IBM mainframe version of Debian. And then there's a source release, and there's multiple architecture support if you need that. Debian does include non-free software, so if you're expecting this to be a pure GNU license, no, you won't find that in Debian. It does include non-free software, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and part of it is because of the Debian social contract. So if you want to know more about that, go out to their website. You can find it. It's pretty easy to find. The Debian goals are clearly stated in their Debian Free Software Guidelines, or the DFSG. One of the things about Debian you can always count on is they will adhere religiously to their social contract and to their free software guidelines. And these have become part of the open source initiatives. So Debian strives solely for stability and usability. That is their core goal. Always has been, as far as I know. I don't know why else would you build a distribution. You really want instability and software that's unusable? So yeah, and security is in there too, but their focus on security has to do with more of isolation, those types of channels to try to do that. So yeah, there are other things that you can use inside of this, inside of the Debian release for security as well, but that is their prime focus. So Debian releases. The Debian Unstable is untested. It's a rolling release. The testing branch is a release beta or release candidate release. Or, it just means it's undergone partial testing. Major releases, the stable branch occurs about every 2 years. Testing branches occur as needed. So they could, it's unpredictable when those come out. SID is because it's a rolling release, there aren't any releases, that it just keeps rolling forward. So yeah, and then they will do Debian on the major stable releases. They will do point releases to try to update the core software, lift it up a little bit to try to make it more relevant. And those are as needed. There's been 2 of them on 10, 10.1, 10.1, 10.2. So about every year maybe, because the last 10 came out 2 years ago. 11 Bullseye was released on August the 14th. Some reviewers, as always, they always refer to Debian as the boring release. There are many display managers that are supported in Debian, and of course GNOME is the default. But some of the things in the Debian release that you will find is that there are a lot of new packages, over 11,000 new packages that have been added, bringing the total up to 59,000 plus packages that are available for you. I think it is second to Arch. I think Arch has quite a bit more, but remember that Debian is testing these, whereas Arch may or may not. You may or may not find tested releases. So 72% of those packages in the 59,552 odd have received new updates. So yeah, it is spun. There has been a lot of activity in that. That's good or bad. I mean, you make that much spin into different pieces of software, and yeah, you could introduce security issues. So yeah, is that a good thing? I don't know. I mean, it depends on what you need. Everybody wants new features. Everybody wants to make sure that they're making their software relevant to the needs of their users. So yeah, that's just the way things are. 16% of the packages, so quite a few of them, have been removed or made obsolete, and those are because of obsolescence. So what desktop environments can you choose from? Now, they have not gone to GNOME 4.0, so you'll find 3.38 still in the Debian space, and there are some good reasons for that. We've talked about that before with Ubuntu, that it's more about how much time from the start of my testing did I have until I'm releasing, and since 4 came out in this past spring, I wouldn't expect to see that being used until Debian 12. But it might show up in a point release. I mean, who knows, right? KDE Plasma 5.2 is the current release inside of Debian 11, LXDE 11, LXQT 0.16, and Mate 1.24. XFCE is 4.16. So none of these are, I can go back and check, but I don't think any of these are the most current, but you're going to find that in Debian. So if you're looking for the most current packages, don't pick Debian as your distro. That's not what they're about. They're not about the latest and greatest. So Debian 11, what else? LibreOffice for 7.0 has been added to the package base. Calligra 3.2, GNU Cache 4.4. There's also a new feature if you are a Chinese, Japanese, Korean language user, then you'll find this a lot easier to use than the other input methods that were available to you in the past. That's FCITX5 is my understanding. I have not used it, of course, but if you have feedback on it and you want to leave it below, I would love to hear back from you. So, and there's just a whole more packages that, I mean, like I said, there's 72% of those packages were updated. So if you want the full list, go out to the site and look it up. You'll find it in the release notes, and for your particular architecture, which is kind of unique. I don't think I've ever seen a distro do that before. I don't remember if Debian did that in 10 or not, where your release notes are tied to your architecture. So you may or may not see the same changes in ARM64 as you might in x86, for example. I don't know. Again, I haven't gone in and done a formal analysis between the two. There's also, I mean, there was driverless printing before in Debian 10, and now they've added driverless scanning. So that, I mean, those are just nice features to have. I mean, Control Groups version 2 has found its way into Debian, and so another nail in the coffin for Docker. Persistent System D journal is also available, is also part of Debian, I should say. It can now use the kernel level exFAT. Previously, you had to install the exFAT fuse, and so your drivers for exFAT ran in your user land, and so you no longer have to do that. It uses the native kernel ones now. And of course, this has been this way for some time now, but the default display manager is GNOME over Wayland. You can still put GNOME over x11 org, so if you want to do that, you can still do that. Also, there's a GNOME Classic that's available as well, if you prefer that look. A lot of changes have been made to the installation system since 10. Many of the improvements have revolved around improved hardware support. So I think what they're trying to do with Debian 11 is that there's so many devices that need to have the firmware installed. For example, your Wi-Fi card, if you're on a Wi-Fi network only, you need to have the firmware for that loaded while you're doing it. Otherwise, you can't get the packages that are updated out in the internet. So, yeah, so their graphics cards may or may not fall into that vein. But basically, they're mapping a hardware ID to the firmware name. And so they will attempt to load the firmware at the time of the install. I'll let you know how well that works as I move this over onto hardware. But yeah, so there was an automated install that was introduced in Debian in the previous releases of Debian. I don't remember which one, but it basically used pre-configuration files. Well, they've updated it now to the point where if you made pre-configuration automated installation files for Debian 10, those won't work on Debian 11. You'll have to make changes to those in order for them to function now, because there has been so many updates to the automated install process. There are also cloud installations that you'll find out there if you're deploying on OpenStack or AWS or Azure cloud environments. You'll now find cloud versions that are ready to go. Of course, containers have been around some time. The Debian's had an official Docker Hub image for quite a while, as well as a virtual machine image, which was out and still is out on Vagrant Cloud. So yeah, if you need those, they're there. Of course, I think there are also ISO files that are available as well. So why would you consider using Debian over Pop! OS or Arch or Ubuntu? If you want stability versus the latest, you're not looking for the latest and greatest. You're not a pioneer. You know, that's not something that is of interest to you. Being out on the bleeding edge isn't what you would consider fun. And debugging your Linux installs after a failed update, and you just aren't interested in doing that. You want better security. Is Debian the most secure release? No, but it has a lot of features that you would find in adding on security features. All Linux distributions do. It just depends on which ones are enabled by default. But Debian is a very good one, and it serves as the basis for Kali, for example. So yeah, I mean, it has been the basis for secure versions of Linux for some time, as has Red Hat. So let's go kick the tires on it. So I've got my Proxmox set up. As you can see, I have installed Debian 11 already, at least once, but I will do it again for your benefit. And I'll go ahead and point it. I always like to run through this just so you can see what I'm doing if you have Proxmox and want to follow along. Now this I've downloaded. This is the one of the live releases of Debian, so it should be pulling its packages from the internet. I am going to use Spice for this. I'm going to install it on my local hard drive on the box, not my cluster. And we'll give it 4 CPUs. That probably won't be enough for today, but I'll go ahead. Oops. Yeah, let's type it right. 4 gig, I should say, 4 gig. And then I'll put the Intel driver in. And that should be it. I'll wait for it to build it out. It's right there. And it's done. And we'll go ahead and start the console. Open the Spice viewer. And so here is where you have some choices you can make. So you can play around with the live version of it. You can use localization. I can do the graphics installer. I can do the text installer, whichever you prefer. Also, if you need the speech synthesis, you can do that too. Although I don't have audio turned on enabled in my VM in Proxmox, so it would not be helpful for me. It would be if I installed it locally. So key map to use American English. Loading additional components. Attempting to auto-configure my network. All right. Call it deb test. Allows me to enter my domain name. Let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger for you. Sorry about that. You can, yeah. So if you want to disable your root password, I'm going to go ahead and put it in, and of course that has ramifications for the sudo user when you do this. So it means that there will be no sudo account created. So when I add my user account, it is not going to have sudo right. So I'll have to do that independently. But we'll get through that. We'll just walk through it together. Okay. And I'm in Central Time Zone. Now you can set up with LVM or encrypted, or you can do your own thing or use the entire disk. I'm just going to do that. I'm on a VM, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, all files in one partition. I could break this out this way, which would make Linus happy, but it also means that it doesn't usually do the partition division well enough that would give you enough room in your root space. So yeah, we'll go ahead and write those out to disk, and we'll give it a few minutes, and it should copy all that lovely stuff to disk. Okay, so it's asking me for a network mirror, so that supplements the software that's included. So we'll go ahead. This is probably part of the new installation manager, and we'll configure it to look in the United States, and then I can pick from a number of mirrors that are potentially closer to me. But for today, I'm just going to leave it at debian.org. I don't have a proxy, so we don't need that. And then it'll configure the apt package to point to the appropriate distribution host. Not too long. So, and then it's saying that it's a new installation, so do I want to install it on my primary device? Yes. I've always taken this, I'm just pointing it to the virtual drive. And finishing. So we're all done, and we can continue on, and it'll finish. get rid of any live packages that are sitting out there. We don't need that. All right, so it's rebooting, and we're ready to go. Our setup page. Yep. Nope. And our keyboard mapping. So let's see. Let me get this up a little bit. Now, one thing I did have a problem with that let's add that to favorites. Let's see, let's go down here. We'll set our colors to gnome dark, maybe. There we go. Make this a little bigger for you. Let's see if sudo got created. Maybe. Nope. So what you'll have to do is use the root password. User mod ag sudo dj Ware. But since I'm here, rather than have to log out and log back in again, wow, 75 updates. I'll be back. Obviously, been busy testing stuff, so I'm going to go ahead. Oops, I don't need that. And get. Go ahead and do those. I'm going to go ahead and get my usual Linus install. All right. And we'll go ahead and reboot it. Oops. Nope. I'm just curious as to what. Now I always do my updates with the package manager, but you may choose to do that some other way or so. But I guess before I do this, I should go look at 712 meg. Now, of course, I am running the package manager right now. That's a pretty light footprint for GNOME, and yeah. Let's take a look at the kernel. It is 5.10, so that is the long-term release of the Linux kernel. And it is identifying itself as version 11 Bullseye. Okay. So neofetch should pick that up. And it did. The version of GNOME is 3.38.4. Okay. Let's see if we can do anything with this. Yeah, it's fine. It has Apache configured. Interesting. Hardening index 65. And let's just go up to the top here and we'll look at it. Yeah, so one of the major ones is IP tables. Is it configured? Yeah, I can just keep looking through these from one distro to another, and it's pretty much all the same problems. Although, yeah, this one is because it's finding Apache, and I normally don't find that one. So, one other thing, did it find? No, we don't have SSH installed, so we'll go ahead and do that. RSA, ECDSA, and ED25519 are the keys. Interesting. All right, so I mean, I don't see any problem security-wise. I'm going to go ahead and get aware of this. And the other thing I was interested in looking at is what I think this is all native, but we'll just check it. Let's see. Let's try Blender and see what it is. Yeah, it's all native. Debian stable main. They have not moved over, to the best of my knowledge, with any flat packs or snaps. They do support snaps, but in fact, I don't know. Maybe it's not even installed. Let's see. Snap. Nope, it's not even installed. The snapd library is. So if you want that, you would have to install that yourself. So that's pretty typical Debian. They let you have whatever choices you want to make in your system, rather than, you know, the distro, whoever's putting the distribution together's choice of how things should be done by default. I mean, you can always uninstall stuff that you don't like, but it's kind of nice that, that's what I've always liked about Debian, is it gives you the opportunity to do what you want. Let me try some of the others just to see where you would typically find. Nope, it's all standard. So yeah, that's what I've always liked about Debian, and it's nice to see they're continuing it with 11. So as far as the tools that are basic to what comes with the base release, now of course there are minimal versions of Debian you can pick. So this would be the live one. So if you pick one of the minimal ones, then you would have a lot less installed here. But it's giving you LibreOffice, and we can bring that up and just see what version it actually is. .7.0, just like they said. Now there have been some patch releases that have come out for 7, so I don't know if they'll catch up with that or not. Some games, some other utilities, a to-do, Thunderbird transmission. There was, I thought, they were actually had, and this is the FC ITX stuff here. So if you need that support, it's there for you. Some music and multilingual. Yeah, none of which I would use. but you might need more than this. You might need less. So I think what I'm going to do is let's talk a little bit about some of the conclusions that I have for this. And let's wrap this up. So, yeah, okay. So, for me, I no longer use, the longer I use Linux, I should say, the longer I'm around Linux and I use it, the more I like boring distros. Yeah, back in the day, it was fun to chase bugs and learn more about the system through, trying to figure out what the logs are telling you and what you need to do to repair it. That's good knowledge to have. Won't deny that. But the older I get, the less of that I want to do, and the more I want to concentrate on my workload, like producing a video. So, yeah, I'm not really too crazy about application crashes anymore or operating system panics. So, yeah, those things are behind me. If you want to do that, have fun, enjoy it. But, yeah, for me, no thanks. Having hardware device support dropped in a patch and rolled out for something critical that I'm using and have it break everything that's running, yeah, I'm not interested in that either. So, I've been around Linux a long time. I am a veteran user. I am not a newbie. Been using it for almost 28 years now. Glitter and shiny objects, they all have their place. I mean, if you need them for development and you're trying to build something around the latest and greatest hardware, the latest and greatest ways of, maybe you're in AI, or maybe you're in big data, or maybe you're in cloud, but you're trying to get support for the latest and greatest things that you need in order to develop the systems that you're working on, that's fine. I'm not talking about that so much, but I am talking about that as far as my daily workloads on both my desktop machines and my server machines. I prefer secure, tested, and working for production releases rather than something like Arch, for example. Arch is a great distribution, don't get me wrong. It's just not right for me. I use Debian and its derivatives for everything I do here. I use variants of Debian and Debian itself for my servers. And I use a variation. I'm using Pop! OS today, which is a variant of Debian, and I'll continue to use that. I'll continue to use Debian and Debian-based derivatives for my servers. The reason for it is that it has a consistent means of being able to manage it. So if Ubuntu, for example, were to come out with some new package manager that eliminated the need to do apt, then I would have to rethink my strategy for what I'm going to do, because Pop! OS is obviously based on Ubuntu, and Ubuntu is in turn based off of Debian. So, yeah, I mean, you have to be careful that don't marry a technology or a distro to the point where you're not ever going to consider trying something else because things change. But for right now, I'll continue to do that until I find something better. I used to use Fedora quite a bit, but Fedora's gone in a direction that I just don't want to follow. I know that some of you have had that same comment with them, and they can go on down the line as far as I'm concerned. I'm not going with them, but anyway, I hope you. Anyway, I do hope you enjoyed this brief look at Debian 11. I also have some reviews on some of the older releases, so if you prefer to work on one of those, and when you consider things like 72% of the almost 60,000 packages have been modified, you might run into a few surprises, like I did on one install of Debian that I did earlier today, and the locales didn't build, and so none of the gnome packages that were that needed a UTF-8 support would run. So, yeah, I mean, it obviously they fixed that because and since the time where I did it yesterday and today, but you never know what you're going to run into when you've got that many changes that you're working with initially. So a lot of times people will play around with a release for a while before they actually bring it into production. And I will do the same. I won't just throw all my servers over Debian 11. I'll work with it for a while and then make sure that my apps are going to run and run the way I expect them to, and the results and the output are what I expect to see. So anyway, that's all I had for today. But if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Hope to see you all again very soon. And once again, thank you to my Patreons that have been helping me. I sure do appreciate that. And if you want to become one, you have links below. Hope to see you all again real soon, and bye for now.